The Hungry Shadow. This is a true story. I know because I survived it. 10 days. 10 days trapped inside my own apartment with no electricity, no phone signal, no one to hear me scream. But I was not alone. Something was in the darkness with me, and it was hungry. So very hungry. My name is Marisol Reyes. I am 66 years old now, but I was 46 when it happened. And if you are listening to this in the dark by yourself, I strongly suggest you turn on a light, right now, before it is too late. Because what I am about to tell you did not only happen in Mexico City, it can happen anywhere, whenever you feel lonely, whenever you give up hope, whenever you let the darkness consume you. It is waiting. Before I tell you about the thing that nearly devoured me, you need to understand who I was. Not who I am now, but who I was then in the spring of 2002, when my world collapsed and something ancient took notice. I worked at Televisa, the largest television network in Mexico. 17 years I gave them. 6,205 days of my life spent in editing bays and production meetings, shaping the programs that millions of people watched every night. I was not the face on camera, but I was the mind behind the screen. Senior editor. The woman whose approval young directors needed before making any decision. I lived alone in an apartment on the 6th floor of an old building in Colonia Roma, one of Mexico City's most historic neighborhoods. The building had survived the earthquake of 1985, but it carried scars. Cracks ran along the walls like black veins. The elevator broke down at least twice a month, and sometimes on quiet nights you could hear sounds from somewhere deep within the structure. Groaning, creaking. The building manager, Senor Gutierrez, always said it was the old pipes settling. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I had no husband. No children. My parents were both dead. My mother passed 10 years earlier from cancer, and my father followed her 6 months later, his heart giving out from grief. My sister Laura lived in Guadalajara, a 6-hour drive away, and we spoke perhaps once a month. I had a boyfriend named Mariano, but our relationship was crumbling because I always chose work over him. Always. He had stopped calling weeks before everything happened. When I needed him most, he would not be there. I was proud of my independence. I never asked anyone for help. I handled everything myself. That was my strength. It was also my fatal weakness. The apartment itself was spacious by Mexico City standards. 2 bedrooms, a living room with ceilings nearly 4 meters high, and French windows that looked out onto a street lined with jacaranda trees. In spring, purple flowers would fall like rain, carpeting the sidewalks below. That was why I chose this apartment. The light, the color. I loved light. Or at least I used to. The building had a smell. Every old building does, I suppose, but this one was particular. It smelled of time, of walls that had witnessed too much. Damp mold crept from the cracks left by the earthquake. Old paint peeled in sheets like snakeskin. The wooden floors creaked in places where no one was stepping. And the sounds. At night, the pipes in the walls would moan, low, constant, almost rhythmic. Senor Gutierrez explained it was due to unstable water pressure. I accepted his explanation, but sometimes at 3 in the morning when I woke up to that sound, I could swear it was not pipes at all. It sounded like someone pleading. Probably just the pipes. Right. My neighbors offered no comfort. The apartment to my left had been empty for years. The previous occupant, an elderly widow, had died alone inside. They found her body 3 weeks after she passed. No one noticed the smell until it was overwhelming. The apartment to my right belonged to Don Fausto, a man well past 80 whose hearing had faded to almost nothing. I could scream at the top of my lungs and he would not hear a sound. The elevator broke down constantly. When it worked, it groaned and shuddered between floors as if in pain. Most days I took the stairs 6 flights up, 6 flights down. It kept me fit. It also meant that if anything happened to me, no one would know for a very long time. I remember the exact day everything changed. Friday, March 15th, 2002. The Ides of March, they call it. The day Caesar was murdered. I was never superstitious, but looking back now, perhaps I should have paid attention. The meeting took place in a glass conference room on the 12th floor of the Televisa building. Outside, Mexico City stretched like a gray ocean under a blanket of smog. Inside, 7 men in gray suits sat across from me. None of them would look me in the eyes. The clock on the wall read 2:17 in the afternoon when the Human Resources Director spoke the words that ended my career. Your contract will not be renewed. 17 years, finished in one sentence. At 2:17 in the afternoon, I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not beg. I simply stood up, bowed my head the way my mother had taught me, and walked out of the conference room. My heels clicked against the marble floor. The sound echoed like a countdown. On the way home, I stopped at a small coffee shop. I ordered an Americano and sat there until it grew cold. I did not drink it. I just watched the foam dissolve on the black surface, as if I were watching my own life disintegrate in real time. That night, for the first time in years, I did not turn on the lights when I got home. I told myself I was simply tired, that I needed rest, that darkness was just the absence of light, nothing more, nothing less. I was wrong. The first week after losing my job, I maintained some semblance of routine. I woke up at 6 in the morning, did yoga for 20 minutes, made coffee, read the newspaper. I even updated my resume and sent a few emails to contacts in the industry. But by the second week, things began to slip. I noticed I was waking up later each day, 6:30, 7, 8. And then one morning I opened my eyes and the clock read 11 in the morning. Sunlight was streaming directly into the bedroom, but I did not feel warmth. I only felt the glare. I pulled the curtains closed. That was the first time. In the days that followed, I began closing more curtains. The bedroom first, then the living room, then the kitchen. I told myself the light was giving me headaches, that I needed to rest in darkness to recover. But the truth was that I did not want to see anything. Not the empty apartment, not the phone that never rang with job offers. Not my own face in the mirror, the face of a woman who had given everything to her career only to have it crumble in a single afternoon. Mariano sent a text message on the third day. I think we need space. Good luck with everything. That was it. 8 months together ended in 12 words. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, betrayal, but there was nothing. I barely had the energy to feel anything at all. Darkness became my friend, or so I thought. There was a young man named Rodrigo who delivered groceries from the supermarket near my building. 20 years old, with an easy smile and curious eyes that had not yet been crushed by life. Before everything happened, I would invite him inside for a glass of water, ask about his studies, his dreams of becoming an engineer. But after losing my job, I no longer wanted to see anyone. The first time Rodrigo came after the incident, he knocked on my door as usual. I did not answer. I stood behind the door listening to the knocking echo through the dark apartment, and I waited. Senora Reyes. His voice filtered through the wood. I have your delivery. Senora, I did not respond. After a few minutes, I heard his footsteps fade away, then the elevator doors closing. The next time, Rodrigo did not knock. He simply left the grocery bags outside my door, tapped once, and left. I waited until the hallway was completely silent before opening the door quickly, dragging the bags inside before the light from the corridor could spill into my apartment. Light. I was beginning to hate it. It happened during the third week. The apartment had become completely dark. All the curtains were drawn. I moved by touch, counting my steps, memorizing the location of every piece of furniture. The coffee table was 12 steps from the bedroom. The refrigerator was in the left corner of the kitchen. The bathroom was the second door on the right. I was adapting to the darkness. But something was not right. The first time I noticed, I was sitting on the sofa in the living room. According to my calculations, it was midday. I knew because the digital clock on the microwave was still glowing its pale green numbers, the only source of light in the entire apartment. But the apartment was not just dark. It was cold. Mexico City in April is scorching, 32 degrees outside, but inside my apartment I could see my own breath. I assumed the air conditioning was malfunctioning, running too high. I stood up and felt my way along the wall to the thermostat. The air conditioning was off. I checked the windows, closed tight, checked the front door, locked. There was no reason for the apartment to be this cold, but I did not think too deeply about it. I just grabbed another blanket and curled up on the sofa. In the darkness, I did not realize something was watching me. That night, I woke up because of a sound. Not a loud noise, not a crash or footsteps. Just a whisper, as if someone was speaking very softly in the corner of the room, too quiet for me to make out the words, but loud enough for me to know it existed. I lay frozen on the bed, heart pounding. "Who is there?" I called into the darkness. The whisper stopped. Silence. Complete silence. Then from somewhere in the apartment I heard something else. Not quite laughter. More like the memory of laughter, distorted and stretched as if it had traveled a very long distance to reach my ears. I gripped the blanket, pulling it up to my chin like a child afraid of monsters under the bed. The sound lasted about 10 seconds. Then it stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning I told myself it had been a dream. Stress and isolation playing tricks on my mind. I made coffee, drank it standing by the kitchen counter, and tried to convince myself that everything was normal. But when I walked into the living room, I stopped cold. The curtains were different. I had closed them loosely the day before, leaving small gaps where slivers of light could enter. Now they were pulled tight, overlapping, sealed against the window frame as if someone had adjusted them during the night. Probably did it in my sleep, I reasoned. I have been so stressed lately. My mind is not working properly. Probably. Right. Senora Vega lived on the 3rd floor with her orange tabby cat named Canela. Sometimes the cat would wander up to the 6th floor, meowing at doors until someone gave her attention. Before everything happened, Canela would often slip into my apartment when I opened the door, rubbing against my legs, purring for treats. But after the 2nd week, Canela stopped coming. I saw her once in the hallway just a few meters from my door. When I reached out to pet her, she hissed, arched her back, and ran down the stairs as if something terrifying was chasing her. Animals know things. They sense things we cannot. I should have listened to Canela. By the end of that first week, I developed a strange habit. I kept turning around, not because I heard something, not because I saw something, just a feeling, a sensation that someone was standing right behind me. The feeling of cold breath on the back of my neck, the prickling awareness of being watched. Every time I turned, no one was there. Every time no one was there, I told myself I was imagining things. But deep down I knew. I knew something was in the apartment with me. Something that was waiting, something that was watching, and it was very, very patient. On the last night of that first week, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling I could not see. The darkness was so complete that I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed. The silence was so deep that I could hear my own heartbeat slow and steady, counting down to something I did not understand. Then I felt it, a cold spot, moving across the room. Not a draft, not a breeze, but something with intent, something with direction. It passed over my face, lingered for a moment, then moved toward the corner where the whispering came from. I held my breath. In the darkness I heard breathing, not my own, something else. A wet, rattling sound, like air being forced through damaged lungs. Like something that should not be breathing at all, and then a voice, not a whisper this time, a voice, finally paying attention. I did not move, I did not breathe, I did not blink. The voice continued, and it sounded like many voices layered together, speaking in unison. Good, very good. We have so much time now, so much darkness, so much hunger. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but I could not move. My body was frozen, paralyzed by a fear I had never experienced before. The cold intensified. I could feel frost forming on my eyelashes. And then, right next to my ear, so close I could feel the chill radiating from it, the voice whispered one final thing. "Sleep now, Marisol. Tomorrow we begin." When I woke up the next morning, I told myself it was a nightmare. Just a nightmare brought on by stress and isolation and too many days in the dark. But there was frost on my pillow. Real frost. In April. In Mexico City. And on the bathroom mirror, the condensation had formed into a shape. A face, no features, no eyes. Just the impression of something watching. When I blinked, it was gone. But the cold in my chest remained. That was when I finally understood. I was not alone in this apartment. Something was here with me. And whatever it was, it had been waiting for someone exactly like me. Someone broken. Someone hopeless. Someone who had already given up. Darkness is not just the absence of light. Sometimes it is something alive, something breathing, something watching. And once you invite it in, once you stop fighting, once you surrender to the emptiness inside yourself, it finds you. It always finds you. Part 2. The second week began on a Monday. I know because I had been counting the days, scratching small marks into the wooden frame of my bedroom door like a prisoner tracking time. 8 marks when I woke up that morning. 8 days since I lost my job. 8 days since the darkness started creeping in. I decided I would not spend another day cowering. Whatever was happening in this apartment, there had to be a rational explanation. Stress-induced hallucinations, sleep deprivation, a gas leak causing me to imagine things. I was a professional woman, educated, logical. I refused to believe in ghosts. The first thing I needed to do was let light back into my home. I walked to the living room window with purpose, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The curtains hung heavy and still, blocking out the Mexican sun that I knew was blazing outside. I grabbed the fabric with both hands, planted my feet shoulder-width apart, and pulled. Nothing. I pulled harder, putting my entire body weight into it. The curtains did not move, not an inch, not a centimeter. They hung there as if welded to the ceiling, as if they had become part of the wall itself. I examined the curtain rod. It looked normal. The rings were in place. There was no lock, no mechanism. Nothing that should prevent the curtains from sliding open. I tried pushing them to the side instead of pulling down. I tried lifting them. I tried everything I could think of. The curtains remained closed. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I moved to the bedroom window, same result. The kitchen, same. The small window in the bathroom, same. Every single curtain in my apartment had become immovable overnight. "This is impossible," I whispered to myself. "This is not real," but it was real. The fabric was real under my fingers. The resistance was real. And the growing terror in my chest was very, very real. I needed help. I needed to call someone. I walked to the telephone on the small table by the entrance. It was an old rotary phone, cream-colored, the kind that had been in the apartment since before I moved in. I picked up the receiver and held it to my ear. Silence. Not the silence of a deadline. Something different. Something alive. I could hear breathing on the other end. Slow, deliberate. Like someone waiting patiently for me to speak first. "Hello," my voice cracked. "Is someone there?" The breathing continued. In, out, in, out. Then very faintly, very far away, I heard something that sounded almost like amusement. A soft exhalation, a recognition. I slammed the receiver down so hard the entire table shook. My cell phone. Where was my cell phone? I found it on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger. The battery was full. I grabbed it and looked at the screen. No signal. I walked around the apartment holding the phone up like a fool searching for even a single bar. Nothing. The entire apartment had become a dead zone. Then the screen flickered. 2 words appeared, white text on black background. No escape. The phone shut off and would not turn back on. I stood in the kitchen, my hand trembling so badly I nearly dropped the useless device. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. I could feel panic rising in my chest like flood water threatening to drown me. The door. I would go to the door. I would leave this apartment. I would walk out into the hallway and never come back. I ran to the front door, grabbed the handle and turned. Locked. I turned harder. I pulled. I pushed. I rattled the door in its frame, locked from the outside, but that was impossible. I lived alone. No one else had a key. And you cannot lock a door from the outside without a key. Someone had locked me in, or something. I pounded on the door with both fists. Help! Somebody help me! I am trapped. My voice echoed through the apartment, bouncing off walls that seemed to absorb the sound. No one answered. No footsteps came running. The building remained silent, as if I were the only person left in the world. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the cold wood, my knees pulled up to my chest. I was trapped, in my own home, in the dark, with something that was not human. The 9th day brought a new horror. I had spent the night on the floor by the door, too afraid to move deeper into the apartment. When what I assumed was morning came, I forced myself to stand. My legs ached, my head throbbed. I had not eaten anything substantial in days. I need light, I told myself. If I can just get some light, I can think clearly. I can figure out what to do. The electricity was still working. I knew because the microwave clock still glowed its sickly green. So the overhead lights should work. I just needed to turn them on. I walked to the living room and flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. I flipped it again and again. Nothing. Maybe the bulb burned out, I reasoned. I will just replace it. I looked up at the ceiling fixture. The socket was empty. No bulb. Just a dark, hollow opening staring down at me like an eye socket in a skull. I ran to the bedroom, flipped the switch, looked up. Empty socket. The kitchen, empty. The bathroom, empty. Every single light bulb in my apartment had been removed. My knees gave out. I sank to the bathroom floor, my back against the cold tile, staring up at the empty socket above me. I kept spare bulbs. I always kept spare bulbs in the kitchen cabinet, the one above the refrigerator. I was a practical woman. I prepared for emergencies. I crawled to the kitchen, pulled myself up using the counter, and opened the cabinet. The box was there. The same box I had bought 2 months ago. But when I opened it, my hands trembling, I found it empty. Someone had taken all the bulbs. Someone who did not want me to have light. I threw the empty box across the kitchen. It hit the far wall and clattered to the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. "Who is doing this?" I screamed into the darkness. "What do you want from me?" For a moment, nothing. Then, from the direction of the living room, I heard 3 slow claps. Clap, 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 deliberate, mocking, like someone applauding a performance. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Finally, a voice said. The voice did not come from one direction. It came from everywhere. From the walls, from the floor, from inside my own head. "Finally, you are asking the right questions." It did not sound human. It sounded like many voices layered on top of each other, speaking in perfect unison. Old voices, dead voices. "What are you?" I whispered. "Hungry," it replied. "I am always hungry." The 10th day, 10 marks on the door frame. 10 days since my life ended and something else began. I had barricaded myself in the bedroom with the only source of light I had left, a box of scented candles that a colleague had given me for Christmas. 6 candles, vanilla scented. Enough to illuminate a small circle around me, keeping the darkness at bay. The thing did not like the light. I had noticed that. When the candle flames flickered, the shadows in the corners would retreat slightly. When I held a candle out toward the darkness, I could hear a hissing sound like water hitting hot metal. But candles do not last forever, and I only had 6. I lit 3 of them, arranging them in a small triangle around where I sat on the floor. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, shadows that moved even when nothing should be moving. I need to understand what I'm dealing with, I told myself. I need information. That was when I remembered the desk. The apartment had come furnished when I moved in 12 years ago. Most of the furniture I had replaced over time, but there was an old wooden desk in the corner of the living room that I had never bothered to change. It had drawers I had never opened, filled with papers and objects left by previous tenants. Previous tenants. The thought struck me like lightning. Whoever lived here before me. Did they experience the same thing? Did they know what this creature was? I took one of the candles and crept toward the living room, my heart pounding so loud I was certain the thing in the darkness could hear it. The desk sat in the corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. I had stopped using it months ago, preferring to work at the dining table. Now in the candlelight it looked ancient, ominous. I pulled open the top drawer, old receipts, rubber bands, a broken pen. The second drawer, envelopes, stamps, a faded photograph of people I did not recognize. The third drawer, a notebook, leather-bound, brown, the pages yellowed with age. I pulled it out with trembling hands and opened the cover. On the first page, written in elegant cursive, was a name. Esperanza Vasquez, 1985. My blood ran cold. 1985. The year of the earthquake. The year thousands of people died in Mexico City. The year the building I lived in was nearly destroyed. I turned the page and began to read. September 20th, 1985. The earthquake took everything. My husband Miguel, my children Rosa and Carlitos. They were in the office building when it collapsed. They never found the bodies. I am alone now. I want to die. The handwriting was steady, controlled. The words were not. October 3rd, 1985. Last night I heard whispering. Probably just the wind. This old building makes so many strange sounds now. Probably nothing. October 15th, 1985. It was not the wind. Something is in the apartment with me. I can feel it watching. It is cold. It is hungry. The handwriting was becoming less steady now, shakier. The letters cramped together as if the writer was afraid of what she was putting on the page. October 28th, 1985. It told me its name. La Sombra Hambrienta, the hungry shadow. It said it would never leave me. It said, I belong to it now. I turned to the last written page. The handwriting was almost illegible now, scrawled frantically across the paper. November 15, 1985. It is here. It is always here. It feeds on my pain, my loneliness, my despair. Every tear I cry makes it stronger. Every moment I spend in darkness, it grows. I cannot escape. I cannot fight. I can only wait for it to consume me. If anyone finds this diary, please know that I did not choose this. I did not invite it in. But somehow I opened the door anyway, maybe by giving up, maybe by stopping to hope. I do not know. All I know is that it is still hungry. It is always hungry. And soon, very soon, I will become part of it forever. The final line was written in different ink, darker, thicker. The handwriting was not Esperanza's. It was crude, childlike, as if whatever wrote it was not accustomed to holding a pen. It is still hungry. I closed the diary, my hands shaking so violently the pages rustled. Esperanza, the woman who lived in this apartment before me. She experienced the same thing I was experiencing. She wrote about the whispering, the cold, the presence in the darkness. And she did not survive. I am not like her, I told myself. I will not give up. I will find a way out. But even as I thought the words, I could feel the lie in them. Because I understood now why the thing had chosen me. I had given up. When I lost my job, when I closed the curtains, when I stopped answering the door, when I let the darkness consume me inch by inch, I had invited it in, and now it was not going to let me leave. The candle in my hand flickered. From somewhere in that apartment I heard that voice again, that terrible chorus of dead voices speaking as one. You understand now, it said. Good. Understanding makes the surrender easier. I will not surrender, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. They all say that. At first, silence. Then much closer than before I heard breathing. In, out, right behind me. I spun around holding the candle out like a weapon. The flame illuminated nothing but empty air, but I could feel it, standing right there, inches away, the cold radiating from its presence seeping into my bones. You are tired, it whispered. You are hungry. You are alone. Why fight? Why struggle? Just let go. Just surrender. It will be peaceful, I promise. For a moment, just a moment, I considered it. The exhaustion was overwhelming. I had not slept properly in days. I had barely eaten. Every muscle in my body ached. Every thought in my head was clouded by fear. Would it really be so bad to just stop fighting, to let the darkness take me? No. The word came from somewhere deep inside me, a spark of defiance that I did not know I still possessed. No, I said again, louder this time, I will not give you what you want. The breathing stopped. Then that sound began again, low at first, then building until it filled the entire apartment. Not quite laughter, more like the grinding of stones, the cracking of ice, something ancient and terrible expressing what might have been amusement. We will see, the voice said. We have time. We have all the time in the world. I retreated to the bedroom, clutching the diary and my remaining candles. I had to think. I had to plan. There had to be a way out of this nightmare. But deep down I was beginning to wonder if Esperanza had thought the same thing. And look what happened to her. Day 11. 11 marks on the door frame. 11 days since I lost my job. The candles were burning low. I had rationed them as best I could, keeping only one lit at a time, surrounding myself with its feeble circle of light. But wax does not last forever. Fire does not burn eternally. And the darkness was patient. That night I found the message. I had forced myself to use the bathroom, stumbling through the darkness with my last candle held before me like a talisman. When I pushed open the bathroom door, the candlelight fell upon the mirror. Words had been written on the glass. Written in something black and viscous that dripped slowly down the surface like congealing blood. Yo tengo hambre. I am hungry. The handwriting was the same crude scrawl from the end of Esperanza's diary. The smell hit me next. Rot. Decay. The stench of something dead for a very long time. Like meat left in the sun. Like flowers rotting in stagnant water. Like the inside of a tomb that had been sealed for centuries. I backed away, knocking into the towel rack, nearly dropping the candle. On the sink, I noticed something else. A small hand mirror that I kept in my purse had been placed there, except now it was shattered, the pieces arranged in a deliberate pattern. A smiling face. It was mocking me. I ran back to the bedroom and did not come out until morning. The 12th day broke whatever remained of my hope. I woke up to find that someone had moved things while I slept. The photograph of my mother on the nightstand had been turned face down. My shoes had been arranged in a neat line at the foot of the bed, pointing toward the door, as if suggesting I should leave. And on my pillow, right next to where my head had been resting, there was a single black feather. Not a crow feather, not any bird I recognized. It was longer than my hand, oily to the touch, and it smelled of that same rotting odor from the bathroom. It had been right next to me while I slept, watching me, maybe touching me. I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, until no more sound would come out, until I collapsed on the floor in a heap of terror and exhaustion. When I finally stopped, I heard breathing again. Not from behind me this time, from right beside my ear. You are getting weaker, it whispered. I can taste it. Your fear, your despair, so delicious, so nourishing. I could not move, could not speak, could not even breathe. A finger touched my cheek, long, cold, wrong. The nail scraped lightly against my skin, almost tender, almost gentle. Soon, it said, very soon you will be ready. And then we will be together forever, just like Esperanza. The touch withdrew. The breathing faded. I lay on the floor for hours, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but exist in a state of pure primal terror. That night I tried once more to call for help. I stood by the front door, pounding until my fists bled. Senor Gutierrez, Senora Vega, anyone, please, I am trapped. Help me. My voice echoed through the empty apartment. No response came from the hallway. No concerned neighbor knocked to ask if I was all right. They cannot hear you, the voice said from somewhere behind me. I made sure of that. What did you do to them? Nothing. Yet. But the walls of this building remember me. They know to keep my meals private. I slumped against the door, tears streaming down my face. Why me? Why did you choose me? The temperature dropped. I could see my breath misting in the air. I did not choose you, it said. You chose yourself. When you closed the curtains, when you stopped eating, when you gave up on the light inside you. You rang the dinner bell, Marisol. I simply answered. I wanted to argue. I wanted to deny it, but I could not because it was true. The candle on the floor beside me flickered dangerously. That night I lit my last candle. I sat in the center of the bedroom, the small flame casting its feeble light, knowing that when it went out I would be in complete darkness. And complete darkness was where it was strongest. The diary lay open in my lap. I had read it cover to cover 3 times now, searching for any clue, any hint of how to fight this thing. Esperanza had not found a way. She had surrendered. She had become part of it. But I was not Esperanza. I refused to be Esperanza. The flame flickered. The wax was almost gone. I need to think, I told myself. There has to be something it fears, something that can hurt it. Light. It clearly did not like light. But I had no more candles, no matches, no flashlight, nothing. Faith, I was not particularly religious, but I remembered my grandmother taking me to church as a child. I remembered the prayers she taught me. Dios te salve Maria, I began, my voice shaking. Llena eres de gracia. The temperature in the room plummeted. Stop! That the voice hissed. El Señor es contigo. I continued, speaking faster now. Bendita tú eres entre todas las mujeres. Stop! The candle flame shot up, suddenly burning bright blue for a moment before settling back to orange. It did not like that. I filed the information away for later. Prayer might not save me, but it could buy me time. The flame flickered again. Lower now, almost out. When this candle dies, I said aloud, I will not give up. I will fight you until my last breath. Silence. Then that terrible, multi-layered voice spoke, and for the first time it sounded almost respectful. You have more fire in you than Esperanza did. Good. The meal will be all the sweeter. The candle went out, and I was alone in the dark with the thing that wanted to devour my soul. Darkness. Complete. Absolute. Suffocating. I could not see my hand in front of my face. I could not see the walls, the floor, the ceiling. There was nothing but black, endless black, stretching out in every direction. And in that darkness, something moved. I could not see it, but I could feel it. The displacement of air, the drop in temperature, the pressure of something massive approaching. Then I felt it touch me. Hands, not one pair, many. Dozens of cold, dead hands reaching out from the darkness, stroking my hair, my face, my arms. Gentle at first, almost tender. You are ours now, the voices said, all of them speaking at once, a chorus of the dead. No, I whispered, no, please. The hands gripped tighter. Cold seeped into my bones. I could feel myself being pulled backward into the darkness, into something that was not a place, but an absence of everything. This is how Esperanza felt, I thought. This is how it ends. But then somewhere far away I heard something else. A knock. 3 knocks, actually. Sharp, deliberate, coming from the direction of the front door. The hands froze. The voices fell silent. Who dares? The thing in the darkness hissed. 3 more knocks, louder this time. And a voice, an old voice, a living voice. Señora Reyes. Are you in there, Carmen? Señora Carmen from the first floor. The old woman with the cloudy eyes and the sharp mind who had lived in this building since before the earthquake. Help! I tried to scream, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. Help me! The hands tightened around my arms. The cold intensified. She cannot save you, the thing said. No one can save you. But even as it spoke, I noticed something. The grip was slightly weaker now. The cold was slightly less intense. The presence in the darkness seemed distracted. Someone was at the door. Someone who knew something, and whatever was holding me did not want that person to come in. I took a breath, summoned every ounce of strength I had left, and screamed, "Help me, I am in here, help!" The hands released me so suddenly I fell forward, hitting the floor hard. From the front door came the sound of voices, multiple voices, living voices, and then light, actual light. Torchlight spilling through the cracks in the door frame. The thing in the darkness screamed, not a human scream, not any sound I had ever heard before. It was the sound of something ancient and terrible being forced to face what it feared most. Light, life, hope. The door burst open, and in that moment, as orange torchlight flooded into my prison for the first time in days, I saw it. Just for a second, just a glimpse. A figure standing in the corner of the room, tall, so tall its head nearly touched the 4-meter ceiling, thin, impossibly thin, like a skeleton wrapped in shadow instead of skin, arms that hung past its knees, ending in hands with too many joints and nails like black knives. And where its face should have been, there was nothing, just smooth, dark emptiness, a void that seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. It looked at me. I do not know how I knew it was looking. It had no eyes, but I could feel its gaze burning into me, searing my soul. "This is not over," it said, and then it was gone, dissolving into the shadows like smoke in the wind. Figures rushed into the apartment, torches, candles, an old woman's voice shouting commands. I collapsed onto the floor, my body finally giving out after days of terror. Señora Carmen knelt beside me, her weathered hands pressing something cool against my forehead. Behind her stood figures I did not recognize, men and women holding torches, their faces grim with purpose. And at the center of them all, standing directly in front of the corner where the thing had been hiding, was an old man I had never seen before. He was short and lean, his skin dark as fired clay, his head completely bald. He wore a simple white robe that seemed to glow in the torchlight, and around his neck hung a pendant of black stone that caught the light in strange ways. His eyes were closed, his lips moving in words I could not understand. Nahuatl, the ancient language of the Aztec people. I recognized it from documentaries I had edited years ago, though I had never learned what any of it meant. The old man's voice rose and fell in a rhythmic chant, and with each word the temperature in the apartment seemed to climb. The bone-deep cold that had plagued me for days was retreating, pushed back by something more powerful than mere fire. "Stay down, child." Señora Carmen's voice was firm but gentle. "Don Aurelio is working. Do not interrupt. Don Aurelio." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it carried weight, respect, perhaps even awe. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from screaming. All that came out was a croak. "Save your strength," Carmen said. "You will need it." From the corner of the room where the shadows still pooled despite the torchlight came a sound. A hissing, spitting sound like water thrown on hot coals. Then a voice, that terrible chorus of dead voices I had come to know so well. "You dare enter my domain, curandero? You dare challenge me with your primitive rituals?" Don Aurelio did not open his eyes, did not flinch. His chanting continued steady and unwavering, as if the monster's words were nothing more than wind. "I have eaten stronger than you. I have consumed priests and shamans and holy men of every faith. What makes you think you are different?" Still the old man chanted. The shadows in the corner began to writhe, to coil upon themselves like snakes preparing to strike, and then slowly, horribly, they began to take form. I had seen glimpses of it before, in the darkness, in the moments when my candle flickered, in the split second when the torchlight first flooded the apartment. But those were just impressions, shadows of a shadow. This was different. This was the thing itself, manifesting in full, forced into visibility by whatever power the old man was invoking. It rose from the corner like smoke from a fire, but smoke with intent, smoke with hunger. It gathered and condensed, forming a shape that was almost human but wrong in every way that mattered. The height was the first thing I noticed. It had to be nearly 3 meters tall, its head brushing the ceiling that I had always considered so impressively high. Its body was thin beyond reason, a skeletal frame wrapped in something that looked like skin but moved like liquid shadow. I could see the outline of ribs beneath that surface, could count each one individually, could trace the shape of a spine that curved in ways no human spine should curve. Its arms hung down past its knees, impossibly long, ending in hands that made my stomach lurch. 5 fingers on each hand, but each finger had 3 joints instead of 2, bending in directions that defied anatomy. The nails were black and sharp, as long as my index finger, curved like talons. And the face. There was no face. Where features should have been, there was only smooth darkness. A void in the shape of a head, No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just emptiness. An absence so profound that looking at it felt like staring into a hole in reality itself. But I could feel it looking at me. Even without eyes, I could feel its gaze. Hungry, possessive, furious that its meal was being interrupted. "You cannot banish me, old man." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, from inside my own skull. "I was here before your ancestors learned to walk upright. I will be here long after your bones have turned to dust." Don Aurelio finally opened his eyes. They were black, not the normal dark brown common to our people, but pure black like polished obsidian, and they were glowing with an inner light that had no natural source. "I am not here to banish you," he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "I am here to show you what you truly are." He raised the pendant from his chest. The black stone caught the torchlight, and suddenly it was not just reflecting the flames. It was creating its own light. A dark light, if such a thing can exist. Illumination that was black instead of bright, but illumination nonetheless. The thing in the corner screamed, not a human scream, not an animal scream. It was the sound of something ancient and terrible being forced to confront a truth it had spent centuries avoiding. The sound shook the walls, plaster fell from the ceiling, the windows rattled in their frames. "Stop!" The voice was no longer mocking, it was afraid. "Stop this! You feed on pain." Don Aurelio continued, stepping closer to the writhing shadow. "You consume despair, you grow fat on the suffering of broken souls. But you forget, Sombra. You forget what you were before. I was always this. I am hunger. I am darkness. I am eternal." "No." The old man's voice was gentle now, almost sad. "You were human once, just like her." Just like all of them. The black light from the pendant intensified, and under its strange illumination the thing began to change. The massive form started to shrink. The impossibly long arms retracted. The skeletal frame filled out became more substantial. The empty face rippled and features began to emerge from the void. Eyes, nose, mouth, hair. A woman's face. No, the voice was different now, smaller, singular. A woman's voice cracked with anguish. "Please no, do not make me remember, please. You have to remember," Don Aurelio said. "It is the only way to find peace." The transformation continued. The towering monster became a woman, small, thin, wearing a simple dress that might have been fashionable 40 years ago. Her hair was dark and long, streaked with gray. Her face was gaunt, the face of someone who had known terrible grief. And her eyes, dark and deep and filled with an ocean of pain. Esperanza. The name escaped my lips before I could stop it. The woman, the thing that had been the monster, turned to look at me. Recognition flickered in those haunted eyes. "You found my diary," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You know what happened to me." I could not speak, could only nod. I did not mean to become this. Tears were streaming down her translucent face. After the earthquake, after I lost Miguel and the children, I wanted to die. Every day I prayed for death. But death did not come. Something else did. Don Aurelio stepped closer to her, his expression compassionate. "The darkness feeds on despair," he explained. "When you gave up hope, when you stopped fighting, you opened a door. And something very old, something that has existed in this land since before the Spanish came, walked through. The hungry shadow, yes. Esperanza's form flickered momentarily, becoming that terrible skeletal shape before settling back into her human appearance. It took me, consumed me, made me part of itself. And then it used me to hunt others, to feed. For 17 years I have been its mask, its lure, its instrument. She turned to me, and despite everything, despite the horror I had experienced, I felt something I never expected. Pity. "I am sorry," she said, "for what I did to you. For the fear, the darkness, the despair. I could not control it. Once you are part of the shadow, you do not choose anymore. You just hunger." Don Aurelio placed his hand on her shoulder. The black light from his pendant surrounded them both. "It is time to let go, Esperanza. You have suffered enough. Your family is waiting for you. My family. For the first time, something other than pain crossed her face. Hope. Fragile and uncertain, but hope. Miguel Rosa Carlitos. They never stopped waiting. The old man smiled. 40 years they have been calling to you. But the shadow kept you from hearing. It fed on your grief, kept you trapped between worlds, never letting you move on. Esperanza's form began to glow, not with the dark light of the pendant, but with something brighter, warmer, the kind of light I imagined heaven might have if heaven existed. But I have done terrible things, she whispered. I helped it feed. I helped it kill. How can they forgive me? You were not in control. Don Aurelio's voice was firm. The shadow used you just as it uses everyone. Your family knows this. They do not blame you. They only want you to come home. The light around Esperanza intensified. Her form became less solid, more ethereal. She turned to me one last time. I am sorry, she said again, for everything. I know you may never forgive me, but I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you. I was just so lonely, so hungry. And the shadow, it twists everything. It takes love and turns it into possession. It takes grief and turns it into hunger. I did not know how to stop. I looked at her, this woman who had terrorized me for nearly 2 weeks. This woman who had been a monster. This woman who had been a victim long before she became a predator. I forgive you, I said. The words surprised me as much as they surprised her. But as I spoke them, I realized I meant them. Esperanza had not chosen this fate. She had been consumed by grief, trapped by something ancient and evil, used as a puppet for decades. She was not my enemy, she was my predecessor, another broken soul that the darkness had claimed. Thank you. Esperanza smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen on her face. Marisol. That is a beautiful name. It means sea and sun. Do not forget the sun, Marisol. No matter how deep the darkness gets, do not forget that the sun always rises. I will not, I promised. The light surrounding her became blinding. I had to close my eyes, had to turn away. But even through my eyelids, I could see the brilliance. And then I heard something that made my heart ache in a way I did not expect. Children's voices. Not mocking or terrible. This was pure and joyful and innocent. The sound of children greeting a mother they had not seen in far too long. Mama Rosa, Carlitos. A man's voice now deeper but just as joyful. Mi amor. Finally you are here. The light faded. When I opened my eyes, Esperanza was gone. In her place, floating gently down through the still air, was a single white feather. Don Aurelio caught it before it touched the ground. He held it up to the torchlight, examining it with an expression of satisfaction. She is at peace now, he said. After 40 years, she is finally at peace. But even as relief washed over me, even as I felt the warmth returning to the apartment for the first time in weeks, I knew something was wrong. The shadows in the corner were still moving. Something is still here, I whispered. Don Aurelio's expression darkened. Yes, the shadow used Esperanza as its vessel, but it existed long before her, long before this building. Long before the Spanish came to these shores. Releasing her has weakened it, but it has not destroyed it. The temperature began to drop again. You think you have won? The voice was different now, older, deeper. Without the feminine tones of Esperanza coloring it, it was pure malevolence. You think releasing one soul will stop me? I have consumed thousands. Tens of thousands. Every tragedy in this cursed city has fed me. Every death, every grief, every moment of despair. I am the shadow that falls over all of Mexico. I am the hunger that never ends. The darkness in the corner began to expand, to grow, to take form once more. But this time it did not bother with human shape. This time it showed its true face. Or rather, its true lack of face. It filled the corner from floor to ceiling, a mass of writhing shadow that hurt to look at directly. Within its depths I could see faces, thousands of faces. All the souls it had consumed over the centuries, their features twisted in eternal anguish. Some wore the clothing of the Aztec Empire. Others were Spanish conquistadors. Many were modern people who could have been my neighbors, my colleagues, my friends. All of them trapped. All of them screaming without sound. All of them feeding the endless hunger of the thing that had claimed them. You cannot destroy me, old man. The shadow expanded further tentacles of darkness reaching out toward the torchbearers, making them step back in fear. I am eternal. I am inevitable. Every light casts a shadow, and I am the shadow of all lights. As long as there is darkness in the human heart, I will exist. As long as there is despair, I will feed. As long as there is loneliness, I will hunt. Don Aurelio stood his ground. The pendant around his neck blazed with that strange black light. You are right, he said. I cannot destroy you. The shadow pulsed with triumph. But I can bind you. I can cage you. I can push you so deep into the darkness that it will take centuries for you to claw your way back. You would not dare. The voice was less certain now. The binding ritual requires a sacrifice, a soul freely given. Who would be fool enough to offer themselves to cage me? Don Aurelio smiled. It was not a happy smile. He reached up and removed the pendant from around his neck. What are you doing? Senora Carmen's voice was sharp with alarm. Aurelio, no. We discussed this. There has to be another way. There is no other way. The old man's voice was calm. I have lived a long life, Carmen. A good life. I have helped many people, saved many souls. This is simply one more. He turned to face the shadow, directly holding the pendant out before him. I, Aurelio Hernandez Zompantli Curandero of the 43rd generation, freely offer my soul as the lock upon your prison. By the blood of my ancestors, by the power of the obsidian, by the light that exists within all darkness, I bind you. The shadow screamed, not in triumph this time, in fury, in desperation, in fear. No, you cannot. I will not be caged again. It lunged at Don Aurelio, tendrils of darkness wrapping around his body, trying to stop the ritual. But the old man did not flinch, did not falter. His voice rose, chanting words in Nahuatl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The pendant in his hand began to spin, faster and faster. The black light intensified until it was almost blinding, and then with a sound like the whole world tearing in half, the shadow was sucked into the stone, all of it. Every tendril, every face, every ounce of darkness. Drawn inexorably into the small black pendant compressed into a prison no larger than my thumb. Don Aurelio collapsed to his knees. The pendant clattered to the floor, still spinning slowly, still glowing with that strange dark light. Aurelio Carmen rushed to his side, cradling his head in her lap. Stay with me, old friend. The curandero's eyes were glazed. His breathing was shallow, but he managed a weak smile. It is done, he whispered. The shadow is bound. It will not trouble this place again. Not for a very long time, but the cost, Carmen said, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. The cost was too high. The cost is what it is. Don Aurelio's voice was fading. Take care of the girl, Carmen. She has seen too much. Help her heal. I will, I promise. And the pendant, keep it safe. Bury it deep. Salt the ground above it. Do not let anyone find it. It will be done. Don Aurelio's eyes found mine. Even in his weakened state, there was warmth in his gaze. Kindness. You are stronger than you know, he said to me. The shadow chose you because you were broken, because you had given up. But you survived. You fought. You held on until help could arrive. That takes a strength that most people never find. I did not feel strong. I felt weak, broken, terrified, but his words planted a seed, a small seed buried deep in the darkness of my soul. Maybe someday it would grow. Remember the light, Marisol? Don Aurelio's eyes were closing. Even when all seems dark, remember that light exists. Inside you, inside everyone. The shadow cannot survive where light burns. Never forget that. His hand fell limp. His chest stopped moving. Don Aurelio Curandero of the 43rd generation was dead. Carmen held him for a long moment, rocking gently, weeping softly. The others in the room bowed their heads in respect for a man who had given everything to save a stranger. I wanted to cry too, but I had no tears left. I had spent them all during my imprisonment. All I could do was stare at the pendant on the floor, the small black stone that now contained something ancient and terrible. It still glowed faintly, and if I looked closely, very closely, I could almost see something moving within its depths, waiting. The aftermath was a blur of motion and voices. Senora Carmen took charge with an efficiency that belied her 82 years. She ordered the torchbearers to check every room to make sure no fragment of the shadow remained. She sent one of them to call for an ambulance, though we all knew it was too late for Don Aurelio, and she knelt beside me, checking my pulse, examining my eyes, assessing the damage that 13 days of terror had inflicted on my body. "You are severely dehydrated," she pronounced. "Malnourished. Your heartbeat is irregular. You need a hospital." I could not argue. I could barely speak. The adrenaline that had kept me functioning was draining away, leaving nothing but exhaustion and pain. It was only then that I noticed my injuries. 3 parallel scratches ran down my left forearm, deep enough to have drawn blood, though the wounds had already begun to clot. I did not remember receiving them. Perhaps during the struggle when the shadow had grabbed me, when those terrible hands had tried to pull me into the darkness. On my neck there were bruises, dark purple marks in the shape of fingers, 5 fingers each with 3 joints. It had been holding me, choking me, trying to claim me even as Don Aurelio performed his ritual. If they had arrived even a few minutes later, I would not be here to tell this story. "Can you stand?" Carmen asked. I did not know. I tried to push myself up, but my arms would not support my weight. I collapsed back to the floor, my vision swimming. "Help me with her," Carmen ordered. 2 of the torchbearers, a man and a woman I did not recognize, lifted me between them. They were gentle, but every movement sent pain shooting through my battered body. As they carried me toward the door, I looked back at my apartment one final time. It was destroyed. Furniture overturned, curtains torn. The walls were scored with long gouges as if something with claws had been raking at them. In the center of the living room floor, there was a stain, black, viscous, spreading slowly outward like oil on water. "What is that?" I managed to croak. Carmen followed my gaze. Her expression darkened. "Itzli," she said. "Shadow blood. The residue left behind when a creature like that is forced to manifest fully." She walked over to the stain, careful not to touch it, and examined it closely. "This is old," she murmured. "Very old. Layer upon layer built up over decades. Perhaps centuries. I do not understand. Every time the shadow claims a soul, it leaves a mark." Carmen straightened her face, grim. "This apartment, this building, this very ground, it has been a hunting ground for a very long time. The earthquake of '85 did not create the shadow, it merely woke it up, made it hungry again." She turned to look at me, and for the first time I saw fear in her cloudy eyes. "Esperanza was not its first victim, Marisol. She was not even close. This stain contains the essence of hundreds of souls, maybe thousands, all the way back to before the Spanish came. The weight of that statement settled over me like a shroud. Thousands of people, consumed by the same thing that had nearly consumed me, their suffering feeding its endless hunger, their souls trapped within its darkness, and I had almost joined them. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. The paramedics asked questions I could not answer. What happened? Why was I in this condition? How did I get these injuries? I mumbled something about a break-in, about being held captive, about not remembering clearly. They did not believe me, but they were professionals. They focused on stabilizing me rather than interrogating me. Carmen rode with me to the hospital. She held my hand the entire way, her grip surprisingly strong for such an old woman. "What happens now?" I asked as the ambulance raced through the Mexico City streets. "Now you heal," she said simply. "Body first, then mind, then soul. And the shadow, the pendant Don Aurelio said to bury it. I will take care of it." Carmen's voice was firm. "I've been preparing for something like this my entire life. My grandmother taught me, and her grandmother taught her. We are the watchers, the keepers. We make sure the old things stay buried." I wanted to ask more, wanted to understand, but exhaustion was pulling me under. "Sleep," Carmen said, as if reading my thoughts. We will talk more when you are stronger. For now, just rest. You are safe. The shadow is bound. It cannot hurt you anymore." I closed my eyes. For the first time in almost 2 weeks, I slept without fear, but my sleep was not peaceful. I dreamed of darkness, of hungry faces pressed against an invisible barrier staring at me with hollow eyes, of Esperanza smiling sadly, waving goodbye as she faded into light, of Don Aurelio, his body crumbling to dust, his soul becoming the lock on an eternal prison. And I dreamed of a pendant, a small black stone buried deep in the earth, pulsing with a faint dark glow. Something was inside it, something that was waiting. I woke up in a hospital room, white walls, white ceiling, sunlight streaming through a window, so much light after so much darkness that I had to close my eyes again, let them adjust gradually. There were tubes in my arm, machines beeping beside my bed, the smell of antiseptic and clean linen, normal smells, safe smells. I opened my eyes again and found Carmen sitting in a chair beside my bed. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her cloudy eyes, but she smiled when she saw me wake. "Welcome back," she said. "How long?" My voice was a rasp. 3 days. Carmen poured water from a pitcher on the bedside table and held it to my lips. "The doctor said you were severely dehydrated and malnourished. Your body was in shock. They wanted to know what happened." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. Some of it. That you were trapped in your apartment during a mental health crisis. That you had stopped eating and drinking. That neighbors found you just in time." She set the water glass down. "They do not need to know the rest. They would not believe it anyway. People see what they want to see, Marisol. Most of them have no room in their worldview for things like the shadow. It is better that way." I wanted to argue. Wanted to say that people deserved to know that the shadow could hurt others, that we had to warn them. But I knew she was right. If I told the doctors what really happened, they would think I was insane. They would lock me up, pump me full of medication, try to cure me of beliefs they considered delusions. Some truths are too big to share. "The pendant," I said instead. "Did you—" "It is done." Carmen's voice was heavy. "Buried deep in consecrated ground, surrounded by salt and iron and prayers. It will hold. For now, nothing lasts forever." She leaned back in her chair, looking suddenly very old. "The binding will weaken over time, decades, perhaps centuries. Eventually someone will find the pendant, someone curious, someone foolish, someone broken enough to hear its whispers. And then it will begin again." Carmen met my eyes. "That is the nature of such things, Marisol. We cannot destroy them. We can only delay them, push them back, give the world a few more generations of peace before the darkness returns." It seemed so hopeless, so futile. All that sacrifice, all that suffering just to buy time. But Carmen must have seen the despair in my face, because she reached out and took my hand. "Do not think of it that way," she said gently. "Every day of peace matters. Every life saved is a victory. Don Aurelio gave his soul to buy the world another century, maybe more free of that particular shadow. That is not nothing, that is everything." I squeezed her hand. She was right, of course, but it did not make the weight any lighter. "There is something else," Carmen said after a moment. "Something you need to see." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small object. "Esperanza's diary. I found this in your apartment," she explained. "I thought you might want it." I took the leather-bound notebook with trembling hands. The pages were still yellowed, still fragile, still filled with the desperate handwriting of a woman consumed by grief and darkness. But there was something new. On the last page after the scrawled, "It is still hungry," someone had added a few more lines. The handwriting was different, steadier, more at peace. I read the words and tears finally came. "If you are reading this, then you survived. You did what I could not. You held on, you fought. You found the light. I am sorry for what the shadow made me do, for the fear, the pain, the darkness. I hope you can forgive me. I hope you can heal. Do not let the shadow win, even now that it is bound. It wins when you give up, when you stop hoping, when you close the curtains and shut out the sun. Live, survivor. Live in the light. For both of us." Esperanza Carmen watched me cry. She did not try to comfort me with words. She simply sat there holding my hand, letting me grieve for a woman I had never really known. A woman who had been my tormentor and my predecessor, a victim who had become a monster and in the end found redemption. When the tears finally stopped, I felt something I had not felt in weeks. Hope, small and fragile like a candle flame in a vast darkness, but present. I stayed in the hospital for 2 more weeks. The doctors monitored my vitals, treated my malnutrition, asked gentle questions about my mental state. A psychiatrist visited every day, probing for signs of trauma, of breakdown, of instability. I told them what they needed to hear, that I'd been going through a difficult time, that I'd isolated myself after losing my job, that I'd stopped taking care of myself and things had spiraled. All of it was true, just not the whole truth. They prescribed antidepressants, therapy, a gradual return to normal life. I accepted everything they offered, nodding in the right places, saying the expected words. But I knew that no amount of therapy would help me process what I had experienced. Some wounds cannot be healed by modern medicine. My sister Laura came from Guadalajara on the 4th day. She held me and cried and demanded to know what had happened. I gave her the same edited version I had given the doctors. She did not fully believe me, but she did not push. "You are coming to stay with me," she declared. "No arguments. You are not going back to that apartment. Not ever." I did not argue. When they finally released me, I went to Guadalajara with Laura. I stayed in her guest room surrounded by her family, her children, her noise and warmth and life. I did not go back to Mexico City for 3 months. When I finally did return, it was only to collect my belongings from the apartment. Carmen met me there along with 2 men who helped carry boxes down to a moving truck. The apartment looked normal in the daylight. Clean and empty, all traces of my ordeal removed. Someone had replaced the curtains, repaired the gouges in the walls, scrubbed away the black stain from the floor. But I could still feel it. A coldness in the corner, a weight in the air, a sense of being watched. "You feel it too," Carmen said. It was not a question. Yes. The shadow is bound, but its echo remains. This place will always carry a mark, a scar on the fabric of reality. She pressed something into my hand, a small pouch made of rough cloth tied with red string. "Salt iron filings and blessed herbs," she explained. "Keep it with you always. If you ever feel the cold again, if you ever hear whispering in the dark, hold this, and remember that you are not alone. Remember that you survived." I tucked the pouch into my pocket where it rested against my hip like a talisman. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you live." Carmen smiled, and despite her age, despite the weariness in her eyes, the smile was bright. "You go somewhere sunny. You build a new life. You remember to open the curtains every morning and let the light in. You remember that the darkness only wins if you let it." I looked around the apartment one last time, the place where I had nearly died, the place where I had learned that monsters were real, and that the human spirit, broken as it might be, could still endure. "Goodbye," I said softly. I was not saying goodbye to the apartment. I was saying goodbye to the woman I had been before. The woman who had defined herself by her career, who had isolated herself from everyone who loved her, who had been so empty inside that the darkness had found her irresistible. That woman was dead. Someone new would take her place. I walked out of the apartment and did not look back. The sunlight outside was warm on my face. I let it soak into my skin, chasing away the last of the cold. But as I climbed into the taxi, as I watched the building disappear behind me, I felt it one last time. That familiar chill, that sense of being watched. And I knew with absolute certainty that somewhere beneath the earth, wrapped in salt and iron and prayers, something was still waiting, still hungry, still dreaming of the day it would feed again. The shadow was patient, and patience was the one thing it had in abundance. 20 years have passed since those 13 days in the darkness. I no longer live in Mexico City. After leaving the hospital, after staying with my sister in Guadalajara, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I moved to Oaxaca, a smaller city in the south where the sun shines 300 days a year, and the shadows never seem quite as deep. I did not return to television. That part of my life ended the moment I walked out of that glass conference room on the Ides of March. Instead, I opened a small bookshop in the historic center of the city, specializing in folklore legends and the supernatural traditions of Mexico. It seemed fitting. If I was going to spend the rest of my life remembering what happened, I might as well help others understand the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of our world. The shop is called La Luz Eterna, the eternal light, a small rebellion against the thing that nearly consumed me. I found love eventually. Miguel walked into my bookshop on a rainy Tuesday afternoon looking for a book on Oaxacan mythology for his mural project. He was an artist, a painter of walls and dreams with kind eyes and gentle hands. We talked for 3 hours that first day. We have been talking ever since. We married 2 years later, had 2 children, a boy named Aurelio after the man who gave his life to save mine, and a girl named Esperanza after the woman who found redemption in the end, hope. That is what her name means. And every time I call her, every time I see her smile, I remember why I survived, why any of us survive. But survival does not mean forgetting. I still sleep with the lights on. Every night, without exception. Miguel asked about it once early in our relationship, and I told him I was afraid of the dark. He accepted this without question, the way he accepts all my quirks and scars. He does not know the full story. He does not need to. I still keep the curtains open during the day, letting sunlight flood every room. I still carry the pouch that Carmen gave me, the one with salt and iron and blessed herbs. It sits in my pocket, always a weight against my hip, a reminder that I am protected. And I still have the diary. Esperanza's diary sits in the drawer of my bedside table. I look at it every night before I sleep, not to read it. I have memorized every word by now, but to remember. To honor the woman who suffered before me, the woman whose pain fed the shadow for 40 years, the woman who finally found peace. Carmen passed away 3 years after my ordeal, peacefully in her sleep. 85 years old, a life well lived, a duty faithfully discharged. Before she died, she told me where she buried the pendant. I have never gone to that place, I never will. But I know where it is, and that knowledge weighs on me like a stone around my neck. Someone has to remember. Someone has to watch. Now that Carmen is gone, that someone is me. It happened 6 months ago. I was in the bathroom washing my face before bed. The children were asleep. Miguel was in the living room watching a football match. Normal evening? Safe evening? I looked up into the mirror, water dripping from my chin, and froze. There was something behind me. Not a clear shape, not a figure I could describe, just a darkness in the corner of the mirror that seemed deeper than it should be, a shadow that did not correspond to any object in the room. And within that shadow I could almost see a face. No features, no eyes or mouth or nose, just the impression of a face, the memory of a face, the hunger of a face. I spun around. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. The corner was just a corner lit by the bright fluorescent bulb I had installed specifically to banish shadows. I turned back to the mirror. The shadow was gone, but on the glass, written in condensation as if someone had breathed on the surface from the other side, were 3 words: I am hungry. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply stood there staring at those words, feeling the cold creep back into my bones for the first time in 20 years. Then I wiped the mirror clean, walked out of the bathroom, and held my husband until the trembling stopped. The pendant is buried. The shadow is bound. Don Aurelio's sacrifice still holds. But something got through. Some fragment, some echo, some whisper of the hunger that never dies. I told myself it was my imagination. Trauma resurfacing. A flashback triggered by stress or exhaustion. I almost believed it. Then the phone call came. It was a Tuesday. I was alone in the bookshop organizing a new shipment of volumes on Aztec mythology. The phone rang, an unknown number from Mexico City. I should not have answered. Some instinct told me not to, but I did anyway. Senora Reyes, a woman's voice, young, trembling, terrified. Senora Marisol Reyes. Yes, who is this? My name is Valentina Ochoa. I live in an apartment on the 6th floor of a building in Colonia, Roma. They told me you used to live here. My blood turned to ice. Who told you that? The old woman downstairs, Senora Mendez. She said you might be able to help me. She said you would understand. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. What is happening, Valentina? Silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, very carefully, as if afraid something might hear, I found a diary in the wall behind the closet. A diary belonging to someone named Esperanza Vasquez. No. The word escaped before I could stop it. No, that is not possible. I took that diary. It is in my house. It has been in my house for 20 years. There is another one. Valentina's voice cracked, hidden deeper in the wall. I found it when I was renovating. And since I started reading it, things have been happening. The lights go out. The curtains close by themselves. And at night I hear whispering. Someone calling my name. I could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but listen as this stranger, this woman I had never met, described exactly what I had experienced 2 decades ago. Please, Valentina begged, please, you have to help me. There is something in my apartment, something in the darkness, and I think it is getting stronger. I opened my mouth to respond. The line went dead. I called back immediately. The number was no longer in service. I called Carmen's old number, forgetting for a moment that she had been dead for 17 years. A stranger answered, confused by my frantic questions. I called the building in Colonia, Roma, the main line that Senor Gutierrez used to answer. A recorded message told me the number had been disconnected. I spent 3 days trying to reach Valentina Ochoa, searching for her online, calling every contact I still had in Mexico City. Nothing. She had vanished, or something had taken her. The police found her body a week later. Valentina Ochoa, 28 years old, graphic designer, found dead in her apartment on the 6th floor of a building in Colonia, Roma. The same building I had lived in, the same apartment. Cause of death undetermined. The coroner's report mentioned severe dehydration, malnutrition, and unexplained bruising around the throat. The door had been locked from the inside. The windows sealed with newspaper. All the light bulbs removed from their sockets. And on the wall of the living room, written in something the investigators could not identify, were 4 words. It is still hungry. I read the news report on my laptop, sitting alone in my bookshop after closing time. The screen cast pale blue light across my face. Outside, the sun had set and the streets of Oaxaca were quiet. I thought about Carmen, about Don Aurelio, about the pendant buried deep in consecrated ground. The binding should have held. It should have lasted centuries. But something had changed. Something had weakened. Perhaps the ritual was flawed. Perhaps the shadow was stronger than we knew. Perhaps there was more than one pendant, more than one prison, more than one hungry darkness lurking beneath the surface of Mexico City. I did not know. All I knew was that Valentina Ochoa was dead. Another victim claimed by the same thing that nearly claimed me. Another soul consumed by a hunger that never ends. And I had done nothing to save her. That night, after closing the shop and walking home through the warm Oaxacan evening, I paused at my front door. The porch light flickered, just once. Just for a moment, probably a loose connection, probably nothing. But I felt it, that familiar cold, that sense of being watched, that weight in the air that I had not felt in 20 years. I reached into my pocket and gripped the pouch of salt and iron. The flickering stopped. The cold receded. But as I unlocked the door and stepped inside, as I turned on every light in the house and checked on my sleeping children and kissed my husband goodnight, I knew it was not over. It would never be over. The shadow was patient. The shadow was eternal. And somewhere in some dark corner of the world, it was still feeding, still growing, still waiting for broken souls to invite it in. I sat down at my desk and began to write. This story, my story, Esperanza's story, Valentina's story, because people need to know. If you are listening to this in the dark alone, I am begging you, turn on a light. Open the curtains. Call someone you love. Do not let the loneliness consume you. Do not let the despair win. The shadow feeds on broken hearts. It hunts the hopeless, the grieving, the abandoned. It waits for you to give up, to stop fighting, to surrender to the darkness inside yourself. Do not let it in. No matter how much you hurt, no matter how alone you feel, no matter how dark the night becomes, the sun always rises, the light always returns. And as long as you keep fighting, as long as you hold on to hope, the shadow cannot claim you. I know this because I survived. I know this because Esperanza finally found peace. I know this because Don Aurelio gave everything to push the darkness back. Remember us. Remember our story. And when you feel the cold creeping in, when you hear whispers in the night, when the shadows seem deeper than they should be, hold on to the light. It is the only weapon we have, and it is enough. It has to be enough. Because right now, as I finish writing these words, the lamp on my desk just flickered. And somewhere in the house, I think I heard my daughter laugh. But Esperanza is asleep. She has been asleep for hours.